You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and guess what? We have a true honor having a special guest, Jemele Hill. She is the host of the new podcast, Spolitics, but you know her. You've seen her on ESPN. She's former ESPN anchor, but her resume is too long, man. I'll have to do 20, 30 minutes on that resume. First and foremost, good morning to you, Jemele. How are you doing today?
I am well. It does get pretty long after a while, but mostly that just means, as in my resume, mostly that just means I'm old.
You're doing great things. I mean, I got to plug your book to the Memoir of Uphill. You released that in 2022. Congratulations on that. But like I said, this podcast, Politics, I listened to the episode on the history of women's sports and the politics of investing in women's sports. Kind of spill the beans to the audience. What is the main focus of the show?
So I know that people have probably heard the popular refrain, stick to sports, which is usually aimed at, you know, people or athletes or people in sports, I should say, that have positions that maybe run counter to some of the people who are listening, because people tend to not say that when they agree with the person. But nevertheless, there's a long, very clear history of sports and politics mixing quite a bit. And since the beginning of time, if people listen to my very first episode, I talk about how George Washington used to host election parties, and in order to get people to vote, they would play games, you know, and he also would ply them with liquor so that he would encourage their voting participation. Andrew Jackson was somebody who was deeply into horse racing. So there's been this long history of where you have politicians who either engage in sports or either use sports as a way to sort of galvanize around political issues. And one of the things that sort of changed, or at least made sports and politics more polarizing, is when Black athletes began to use these same platforms to speak to the conditions of their communities, to draw attention to wider social justice issues. And then all of a sudden, people didn't want their sports mixing. And so what this podcast aims to do is that I want to sort of put all these pieces together and sort of explain some of our modern political structure and the things that we see happening in sports, and explain those links to wider politics. Because the great thing about sports, because it's something we do that unifies us, is something everybody does together. One of the few things in this country we do together. It affords us an opportunity to really examine things differently through a sports lens as opposed through a political lens.
And with your rich history of 20-year plus in journalism in your career, you also are an Emmy Award-winning journalist. Being able to make your stamp in this industry, how do you see that as a way forward to not just inspire other young women, but also to help them understand that there's a lot of things possible in this world if you put your mind to it?
Well, I think, especially at this iteration of my career, I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to do the things I want to do as opposed to doing things that I don't, want to do. As I often say, is that, the great part about this stage of my career is that I work with people and not necessarily for people. And the way you get to that point is that, you have to put in the work. And, before I got to this portion of my career, I have 20 plus years of credibility sort of stored up. A lot of people think that these kind of journeys happen overnight, but they happen through time and through evolution and through pivoting and through a lot of different things. And so I hope anybody who looks at my career, understands that it took a lot to get here. And even though people tend to latch on to the glamorous parts of your career, they look at my time at ESPN or, as you mentioned, me writing a book, or the fact that, I currently have a television show on True TV. That's a sports show. It's like they look at those sorts of things, and sometimes they can miss the process it takes to get to that part of it. And so what I would tell young people especially is that the process is the part you have to embrace, is that whatever it is you're doing in life, you have to love it just as much when maybe you're not making as much money. Maybe it's not really as glamorous or appealing to outsiders. Yeah, I often say that I love this job just as much as I did when I was 20 years old and getting paid $30 a story to cover high school sports. The love has not changed for journalism and particularly for sports writing and sports storytelling. And I think because it's really something that has been a lifelong passion, it's been able to power me through whatever ups and downs happen in the industry or, other pivots that I've had to make.
We're talking to Jemele Hill, the host of the new podcast, Spolitics. And if I can call you a GOAT, you're one of the GOATs, if I could say that, because...
Well, I appreciate that.
Because when I saw this, I said, wow, I get to talk to her. Oh, my God, I can't be a fan. But just understanding the process of all the things you had to go through as a person to get to where you are today. Before we close, kind of touch on that, how that plays a role in your journalism and how that plays a role in you being ambitious to keep proving people wrong.
Well, for those who read my book, my memoir, Uphill, I'm going through a lot of the personal struggles that I had to endure. My parents were both recovering drug addicts. I grew up in Detroit and, inner city Detroit, was on welfare. My mom was on welfare on and off throughout my childhood. And so, I've experienced poverty. Obviously, again, being the child of recovering addicts, I've experienced seeing, my parents go through something that was, kind of a devastating time in their life. And, all those battles and all those struggles that I had to endure really prepared me for the moments that I would face later on in life. And it's allowed me, or rather I should say it's blessed me with an amazing amount of perspective. There's no career setback that I've ever had that could match some of the things I had to experience growing up. And I think that allows me to, not get too high and not get too low about some of the things that I experience. And it's important that we sort of keep, even with professional desires, sort of keep a certain amount of perspective, even when we experience failure or setbacks or just get frustrated just in general. And so because of what I did experience growing up, I think it's allowed me to be able to weather, quite a bit professionally. So, I've told my mother this many times, is that I understand that she would never have wanted me to see some of the things that I did, but I'm also grateful that I did, because I would not have wanted, despite some very painful lows in my childhood, I would not have wanted it to go another way.
Once again, listen on Refocus Radio, talking to the one and only Jemele Hill, host of the new podcast, Spolitics. Make sure you go get that book too, Uphill. Once again, thank you for your amazing time this morning and wish you the best.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the conversation.